It's a bit like spending 40 years building a wonderful sandcastle and then being told to go and trample it all down and have pleasure doing it, right? People would feel quite sad about that. So what you need to do is build the skill of spending, and it's very, very hard. And that's where the numbers don't matter. I've worked with people who will never, ever run out of money, no matter what they spend, yet they still question the minutiae of spending because they have been conditioned to save all of their life. And it's a real, real struggle. Again, it plays into a lot of these biases, this loss aversion. So I think risk is interesting from a point of, we see risk as loss of money. But if we rewire that and say, actually, the ultimate risk is loss of memories and experiences. That's the ultimate risk. The loss of creating those memories and experiences. And when I reframe this with people, I say, listen, you are not at risk of leaving money on the table, and you are not at risk of losing money. You're at risk of leaving memories and experiences on the table. So if you hoard your money and you don't spend it.
Late starters have a unique issue or problem here because they were late to the savings game. They're in a rush with the math and the optimization to get to the money of enough. And then it becomes more important to realize, I made it. Okay, I can't necessarily oversave. And so you have to be really good at figuring out, okay, this is where the curve peaks, and I've got to start spending time and not saving money. Because if you overwork because you're fearful of the future financially, you'll have spent life that you can't get back.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hey, welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Young, and today we're talking direct to my people, the late starters, the folks that didn't discover index funds until their 40s or 50s. Maybe they raised kids, changed careers, took care of parents, got knocked off course once or twice because life happened, or just woke up one day and said, wait, retirement is when? Who's going to save me? If that's you, we see you. We are you. You are exactly who this conversation is built for. We're leaning heavily today on the work of Dan Haylett, a seasoned financial planner, the head of growth at TFP Financial Planning in the UK, the creator of Humans versus Retirement, and the author of the new book, The Retirement You Didn't See Coming. Dan works primarily with people 50 plus. That's our people who are navigating the emotional, behavioral, and the holy cow, this is real transition into retirement. He gets the late starter mindset, the mix of urgency, hope, and I really don't want to screw this up. Dan argues something powerful. Retirement is not the finish line of financial independence. In fact, for many late starters, FI and retirement happen practically on the same day. And what now? That what now moment can feel even sharper. As Dan puts it, there's no spreadsheet for what happens next. So today we're going to walk through the 4 to 5 phases of retirement, the contradictions, the reverse engineering of our lives, beginning with the end in mind, the excitement, the shocks, the psychological pivots through the lens of the late starter, because your journey may look different, but it absolutely can be remarkable. Dan, let's get into it.
Bill, amazing. Cannot wait to have this conversation with you.
All right, so let's start with humans versus retirement. I hate the word retirement, and these are counterposing forces. Tell us why you called your podcast that, why this is your movement, why this is your passion. What does that mean?
Yeah, basically it means that retirement is more of a human problem than a maths problem. And I figured that out a reasonable hard way when I first become a financial planner, and all of the training that you have is numbers, right? It's kind of this, numbers, that, spreadsheet this, cash flow plan that. And I remember working with some people very early on in my career, and building the most wonderful financial plan. Cash flow, never going to run out of money, everything's fine. Go and retire and you'll be wonderfully happy. And seeing them 6 months later, and you could see that it was like life had been drained from them, right? The relationship with their wife and with each other was completely different. They were thinking about going back to work because they didn't know what they were doing with their time. And it really made me lean into that retirement is more of a human problem. And in fact, retirement is a myth. It's a man-made concept that was invented to get old people that couldn't work in factories anymore out of the factory, right? And so we are now taking this retirement narrative into a modern world, and the human being and all of the instincts that we have just fight against what we perceive retirement to be. And so the Humans versus Retirement podcast, which kind of started all of this, was simply kind of saying, the name come out of thin air, like all of these things that potentially have some great inspiration. There was not a lot of thought behind it other than, what am I trying to achieve here and what are the conversations that I'm having? And it was, well, listen, this is conversations where human beings are butting up against retirement and struggling about what retirement means, struggling about this phase of life, struggling about all of this emotional impact. And it just come to me, this is a battle. The human being is battling against this phase of life that we've been socially or the social narrative has really infiltrated our brain and our emotions, and we struggle with what this phase of life means going forward. And that was where it all come from. And how can we now focus on the human to ensure that there isn't this battle with this phase of life, and they go and enjoy, live what is actually the most amazing phase of life, because it's the phase of life you've got the most wisdom, the most knowledge. You can do so much with your time and your freedom and your health in your 50s and 60s. And people just become paralyzed because they think they are retiring from work. And that is part of the problem. So, yeah, it was kind of a all in, suddenly hit me between the eyes, thought it sounded pretty good, and 2 feet in and went for it.
So let's take it back a little bit, because you came to financial planning later in life. I want to hear a little bit about your money journey and how did you become passionate about this? Because you've only been doing it a handful of years, right?
Yeah, so when I realised when I was 19 I wasn't going to be a professional cricketer or golfer, right? Those were my two passions. Cricket is a thing that I think a lot of Americans don't really get, but it's starting to get there a little bit. But sports was my thing, and when I realised that wasn't going to happen, I should get a proper job. And I started off in the investment management space. So I worked in London for big investment management houses and worked on the sales side, where I used to travel around the country speaking to financial advisors about how they invest their clients' money and help them construct kind of evidence-based investment propositions. And so I've been exposed to financial advice and financial advisors in the UK for probably nigh on 20 years. And I've been through a whole host of regulatory changes that have happened. And really, to be frank, I had a very good job that paid very well in a corporate environment. And I say to people that I retired at 35, 36. I retired from corporate life because I had no purpose. I didn't like what I was doing. I felt like I had no impact. It felt very, very hollow, and it butted up against my family life. I had a young family at the time. I was traveling a lot, and it just was not fulfilling. And actually, my relationship with money became quite negative in that I was earning really, really good money, but it meant nothing because the way I earned it didn't have any impact. And I really struggled to kind of connect the two. And so I effectively took the leap of faith at nearly 36, going, I need to figure out what I want to do. I need more purpose. I need more intention. I need to have a bigger impact. I want to feel the impact. And that's the kind of work that I want to do. And it really come about by just knowing the financial advisor space. And I was thinking, look, I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly in the UK of financial advisors. I see the good and the impact that does. I also started really delving into the human element back then, right? Kind of, I've always been fascinated by human behavior, always been fascinated by kind of sports psychology and behavior of humans when it's kind of high performing and things like that. So I took this leap of faith. I was like, I really, really want to do something that feels more impactful, more purposeful for me. And I went through that big transition at a young age, 35, 36, where I'm going to transition now into I'm going to start, curiously, I'm going to be a learner again. I'm going to be a beginner, right? I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to learn and grow and build and shape something that feels like I can really have a big impact and want to rip the duvet off in the morning and get up and do amazing work. And yeah, that was kind of where it come from. And this real passion then built up to see the life-changing stuff and outcomes that some of our clients got through the work that we were doing with them, and increasingly understanding more about the human being. And you see that snowball effect, right? It's kind of, I'm doing more, I'm doing better, I'm getting better, I'm understanding humans more, and we're having a bigger impact. It's not all about the spreadsheets. And it very, very quickly snowballed into an environment where you just get enthused by the work and the impact that you have, and seeing the outcome of helping people realize and living the life that they've always wanted to live but never felt like they could. So yeah, that's a shortened version. There's a bit more, but I won't go into it.
I'm sure there is, and maybe we'll hear some more as we go through this conversation. But it sounds like most people who are on the FI journey and maybe in a rush to do it because they don't like their job or it just doesn't fulfill them. You focused on the math first. You were creating portfolios for these advisors, and then you flipped the script. You inverted it and found out that the human being and the emotion and the human brain, psychology and biology, where all this lived, was actually the most important and first thing that we needed to focus on. You invert the script. It's like, let's start with the end in mind. Let's start with imagining our death. Let's start with, okay, when we get there, do we want to succumb to the 5 regrets of the dying? How do we avoid that? And if we design our lives that way, our life arc, our financial arc, and it's hard to get young people to do this, that are living in the present, that are living on dopamine highs and aren't living on delayed gratification and more of a balanced life. So we're going to talk about Charlie Munger's thing today. We're going to talk about inverting how we think about money, how we think about life, and reverse engineer it. So there's a lot of conflicts that we talk about. But before we do that, and we'll go through a few of them, you talk about the anachronistic or archaic principles of retirement. Can you tell us what retirement looked like before we had this extended health span and lifespan and financial need? What did our parents do with this, and why is today different?
Yeah, you can go back to the beginning, because the beginning wasn't actually that long ago, right? I mean, we're talking 100 years, just over, when this thing called retirement was effectively invented. In fact, it's a centuries-old thing for soldiers, and retire is a French word, and it kind of soldiers off battlefield, but that wasn't an official retirement. But where it was properly invented, both from a human point of view and a money point of view, was basically getting people out the factories, like I said. So you worked in factories and you were too old to do that manual labour, so they basically forced you to leave, to bring younger people in. And it was the German Chancellor Bismarck who then said, well, we can't just let these people go onto the streets. They've got no money, no income, they're a drain on society. We need to provide some sort of state help to them. But very cleverly, he done it in a very political way, where he brought state pension in, their state help, after they were dying. So people were retiring from the factories in their 60s and lasting another 2 or 3 years. And his kind of state pension age was, originally it was in its 70s. I think the first ever state pension was you got it at 72. But no one ever really made it to 72 back then. So that's evolved in a way that the States and then the UK kind of started putting in state help into people retiring from the industrial age. But what's happened really rapidly is that particular framework of retirement is the end. I'm retiring from something because I cannot physically or mentally do that thing anymore. It's still a hangover in people's psyches. But we've moved on, haven't we? We don't really work in factories anymore. The vast majority of people are knowledge workers now that actually have no real need to retire from anything because they can physically and mentally continue to do the work. And so you couple that with the changing financial landscape. If you think about our grandparents that retired from work with a guaranteed defined benefit pension, they had an income, they lived to that income, and they might have been actually happier, right? Because there was nothing else they had to worry about at that time. So what's evolved over the last 20 or 30 years is this real conflict of money and meaning. So whereas money now has become more challenging, we are asked as a group of human beings to take the brunt of the load and weight of money on our shoulders. So defined benefit pensions don't really exist anymore. It's a defined contribution invested pot of money that has all of those emotional burdens along with it, longevity and inflation and market returns and all the worry and angst that you get seeing your money go up and down and spending it. And then you couple that with the fact that the aspirations of people, of knowledge workers now, are much more than they were many years ago. People are now kind of stepping back from work, and I, like you, I don't like the word retirement, but they're stepping back with work with more vitality, more health, more wanting to do things. The world is a smaller place in that travel and outlook and optimism and aspiration is more inbuilt into us. So I think it's one of those things. It's a bit like the Blockbuster moment. You know, it's kind of like people don't want to buy videos until they don't want to buy videos and the whole thing just shuts down overnight. It feels like this has been a quiet creep over the last 20 or 30 years. And it's really coming through now where we've got this money meaning double whammy. People want more meaning. They want to feel more. They don't just want to retire from something. They want to generate a better life for them. And their money is causing them a lot of issues in terms of the psychological baggage that that money has. And so if I flip it and go back to our grandparents, they probably didn't have both of those, right? The money was taken care of and they probably were much more local in their way and they didn't travel as much and a bit more. So they had a probably much more simpler life. So that's where I think this thing has evolved really, really quickly. We've got identities tethered to work. So people really struggle when they kind of go, who am I going to be? Because for 30 years, they've been managing director, they've been doctor, they've been dentist, they've been whatever they have been. And so that identity has given them so much social purpose that they struggle to strip that away. And that, to me, I think is a big byproduct of the modern society, the identity tethered to work, the purpose tethered to work. And people don't really know who they are anymore because they've been spoon-fed for a number of years their days and their diaries and this always on busy, noisy world that we now live in. And you mentioned the dopamine hits. People struggle to wean themselves off this in a modern way. And I think it's where the real modern day challenge is coming from.
Yeah, you mentioned something about identity and who we are. The first thing we ask in a conversation when we go to a Christmas party is, what do you do?
Yep.
And you flip that and you say, what do you care about? That's more important than what you do. But we focus on that, what we do, what we earn, our identity attached to money as it grows. There are so many things that are just uncomfortable that we don't realize because we're not focused on the person. We're focused on externally what they do and not internally who they are. Is that the part of the problem with retirement?
Yeah, I think part of a modern world, Bill, is that it's full of external influences, isn't it? You know, I think we're not really intrinsic anymore. We're extrinsic, aren't we? It's a lot of people. We're not looking who we are. We're looking the identity around what we do, isn't it? We look at what we do is who we are, but what we do isn't who we are. And it is very much an extrinsic thing. We can tell the world what we do. we can give them a business card, we can validate that with proof of what we do. And that gives us social status, that gives us all of those things. And some of them are great, but actually if we look inside ourselves and say, actually, who are we? What's most important to us? And what truly makes us happy and feel alive? That is very different to what we do.
I agree, because to me, I'm a doctor, and so we focus on the exoskeleton that holds us up. And if that falls away, how do we stand up? We need to focus on the endoskeleton that really holds our posture.
I am so excited to announce our new partnership at Catching Up to Fi with MONARCH. MONARCH is a comprehensive financial tool to monitor your financial health and life. I have been using MONARCH for 3 years to track my spending, net worth, budget, savings goals, and more. I am not a spreadsheet nerd, and without MONARCH's robust, intuitive tools and user interface, this process would have seemed impossible. I was recently also able to seamlessly share my data with our new flat fee financial planner for a retirement readiness checkup when I turned 60. He uses MONARCH with all of his clients. After our analysis, I was shocked to find out that we were financially independent 3 years before I thought we would be. You can't manage what you don't measure. Using MONARCH was critical in this review and planning process and remains important in monitoring my ongoing financial health. Thanks to MONARCH, all of our podcast listeners and community members have access to a 50% discount off their first year subscription. Simply follow the link below and use the discount code CatchingUp50 at checkout. I am proud to say that my sons are the first to use the code to join the MONARCH family. I encourage you to share this link and code with family and friends who need or want to take back their money and grow their wealth. You also talk a lot about the human brain and the human biology, chemistry, and how we're wired, because we're not wired for retirement. Take me through your thoughts on the neuroeconomics, your money and your brain that Jason Zweig wrote, because it's critical to understand that, because we need to rewire ourselves in accumulation and in decumulation.
Yeah, so I think our brain is wired through a number of different things, right? It's wired through our evolution. And that wiring, we have to understand, has not moved on much from us checking whether that rustling in the bush is kind of going to eat us or we're going to be able to eat it, right? And it sounds a bit flippant, but our brain is still wired for a survive first, thrive second mentality. And that's why we're here, right? There were other creatures a lot like us back in the day, but they weren't as survival first as us. So we are naturally wired to be cautious. That's why when you look at the work of Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, one of their biggest foundational pieces was loss aversion, right? The fact that losses hurt us twice as much as gains give us pleasure. We are wired to have losses hurt, to survive first, to make sure that we don't hurt ourselves or put ourselves under pressure or put ourselves in danger. And if we know we've taken care of those things, then we might let ourselves go to a thriving state. So you've got that bit, right? That hardwired evolutionary thing that actually hasn't evolved that much and is a big, big player in our psyche. You've then got the bit around our learnt behaviours and observations, right? So things around our influences from our parents and our grandparents and our work colleagues and HR departments and whatever that might be as you kind of grow up, and the influences that they have on us and how that's kind of built into our money stories, as people say, and our money scripts and things. These things that we've seen and observed that have influenced the way that we behave and think. And then thirdly, you've then got this thing where I think it's important to understand. We won't go into too much detail on it, but you can categorize it by saying there's kind of a left side, right side of brain, right? The brain, two sides. And one of those sides is logical and numbers based, and the other side is about stories and emotion. The stories and emotion side of the brain is the one that takes over, and the one that actually believes, the one that we actually want more of, The other side of the brain, the spreadsheet side, as I call it, we don't trust that side that much. And actually the brain it doesn't trust numbers and it doesn't believe them. And that's why you can show someone a projection on a cash flow in a spreadsheet that says they're never going to run out of money, but their right side of their brain doesn't compute because you haven't told it in a story or in a way where they can relate to it. We can't relate to numbers like we relate to stories. And so when we think about what our money gives us, if we're staying in the numbers, which sounds ridiculous, but if we're staying in the numbers, money will not ever be unlocked to have its true meaning. If we're staying in the spreadsheet, it's never, ever going to give us what we require. That's why when I talk about the book, it's like people think that numbers are going to give them security. Once I've got enough, I'll be fine. But that's not the case because we don't believe them. And the research out there says if you ask someone with $1 million, how much do you need? How much is enough? They'll say 2. If you ask someone with $2 million, they'll say 4. The number is often double what they've got because they just don't believe the number on the spreadsheet. What they do believe is if you take that out and create more of a narrative, more of a story, more of a way to actually connect those numbers to meaning in life, that's what really does transform it. So we've got 3 kind of forces going against us. This hardwired survive first, thrive first, second, probably an observed and learnt behaviours about save for a rainy day from our parents and grandparents. And that really, really kind of hampers the way for us to realise we're financially independent and go spend our money and time. And then you've got this thing around the staying in the numbers environment because that's what we're feel like we're conditioned to do, and simply not believing what those numbers are telling us.
Yeah, I love your way of slicing and dicing the brain. And Kahneman's thinking fast, thinking slow, system 1, system 2. The way I see it as a physician too is we're wired with our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. It's fight or flight or a vegetative, digestive, reflective state. It's your brain stem that forces you to breathe, and then it's your limbic system that, again, you can have fear or no fear. Our brains are created to conflict naturally with the way life, a lived experience is now. And we do have to have frontal lobes that suppress those innate reflexes and then explore the right side of our brain, because that's where creativity lies. That's where retirement lies. That's the retirement side of the brain. It's not the left side of the brain at all. And I feel like I had a hypertrophied left side, my head was lopsided, and an atrophied right side. And this transition from accumulation to decumulation is moving from one side of the brain to the other, or trying to live with them in balance the whole time and not focus on the one to the detriment of the other. So this brings up sort of the contradictions. This is the verses. And you're very good at semantics and using words in a different way or in more of a proper way. So let's go through some of the contradictions. And the big one, the elephant in the room, is time versus money. Take us through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it can be time versus money. It can be time and money. It can be just time or just... I think my point around time and money is that I think how we spend it and how we view it is... I think most people are really bad at it. Most people are very bad at spending and viewing their time wisely and spending and viewing their money wisely. And I call this a bit of like the psychological battleground. And we talked before about the sketches that I do. It's kind of the way I picture this is like a Venn diagram with the overlapping bit in the middle. You've got spending money and spending time, or time and money. And in the middle, you've got stuff like permission and guilt and courage. These kind of feelings and emotions that we get when we think about time and money. And quite simply, I think that if we look at time, we have a very, very abstract, bad relationship and view of time, in my opinion, in general. And there's a great bias called the end of history illusion, which I talk to a lot of clients about. And this basically is, say, right, you're 50 years old. I want you to tell me what you're going to be like in 10 years' time. What's Bill at age 60 going to be like? And most people will go, I don't think I'm going to be much different to what I am today. And if you go, okay, what was Bill at age 40 like? They'll go, oh, he's a totally different person. Bill at age 40 was doing this, 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 and this. We struggle. We think today is the end of history and nothing is going to change going forward. Yet, if we look back in our lives, we know we're completely different. And you can say 20 years, what are you going to be like 20 years from now? What were you like 20 years ago? So our relationship with time is really, really challenged. And if you think about the impact of time, a year in our 20s versus a year in our 30s, there actually isn't that much difference. There's not that much difference. But a year in our 50s versus a year in our 30s is different. And the research suggests that the compounding effect on the effect of time is that every year past 60, the effect gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And yes, you are obviously nearer to the end of your life, but you're nearer to becoming a little bit less healthy. You're nearer to not being able to do some of the things mentally and physically. And people don't believe that. When they step into their second half of life, a lot of people think this is one long linear 30-year period. And it simply isn't that. There is a window of opportunity when time and health is on your side to be able to enjoy things better than when you maybe get into your mid-70s and then when you get into your mid-80s. And I know that the longevity argument is out there. But again, if I look at that and you look at the stats around healthy life expectancy, so your health span versus your life expectancy, your lifespan, the gap has widened. So yes, we are living longer, but you'll know this, right? Obviously, yes, we are living longer, but the statistics are suggesting that our healthy life expectancy hasn't kept up nowhere near that life expectancy. So what Western worlds have done very well is keep people alive longer towards the end of their life, which has a whole load of ramifications economically and financially, etc. But quite simply, you have this 3 phases, what I call the exploring go-go years, the nesting go-slow years, and the reflecting no-go years. And we need to plan our time and our energy and the way we spend it in relation to those 3 phases. Because naturally, things will just start to slow down. We will not want and have desires to do some of the things in our 70s that we would have in our late 50s and early 60s. And the sooner we start planning our second half of life and our retirements like that, the better everybody will be for it. And so that kind of goes into the money thing, which we'll catch on to in a second. But how you spend, and when I say expenditure, time, money, and energy, right? They're the 3 things that we typically kind of spend. We're rubbish at all of that.
Yeah, and Carl Richards also talks about attention adding to those assets. Your time, money, attention, and energy. Those are your assets in life. We focus on the money. And interestingly, we're not good at spending. We're not good at spending money, nor are we good at spending time. Right. And we're not necessarily even good at saving time. And you have to ask, can you really save time? And yeah, there are ways to do it, but you need money to do it. And we're not good at saving money. So spending and saving and purpose and meaning, what and why, all these things are contradictory, and needs and wants. It starts with that as a kid. And maybe you learn to spend first and save second, but then you got to save first and spend second. And then later in life, you got to spend and learn how to do that all over again. And it kind of flips throughout life. What do you think of saving and spending?
Yeah, I think saving is a habit, spending is a skill. And you're quite right. Before you end up with some responsibilities, you do pretty well spending money. I think about my children. They love spending money and getting new things, etc. So we're in that phase. But when we get some responsibilities, when we want stuff like a house and children and other things that come with being an adult, we then condition ourselves somewhat to save. And some people are better than others. But in general, it's a habit that we build. And again, I go back to influences in our lives around the savings habit. Grandparents and parents save for a rainy day, save for the future. HR departments at work, but particularly in the UK now with this thing called auto-enrolment, we are enrolled in pension savings. We opt in first, right? So we're told we need to save part of our salary, which is all wonderful stuff. But we build this habit of saving. And the thing about building a habit of saving is that it actually starts making us feel quite good. And we attach security and status to that savings habit. We like going onto our statement and seeing it go up, etc., etc. So my thing there is, can you imagine doing that for 30 years, maybe even 40 years? You've got this habit that you've now created that actually has delivered security and status and the outcome of good work. So it's given you kind of pleasure because, you know, you've been paid well for the work you've done. So you've now got all of this. It's a bit like spending 40 years building a wonderful sandcastle and then being told to go and trample it all down and have pleasure doing it, right? People would feel quite sad about that. So what you need to do is build the skill of spending. And it's very, very hard. And that's where the numbers don't matter. I've worked with people who will never, ever run out of money, no matter what they spent, yet they still question the minutiae of spending because they have been conditioned to save all of their life. And it's a real, real struggle. Again, it plays into a lot of these biases, this loss aversion, right? When we see our bank account going down, our pension statement being depleted, it hurts us twice as much as it going up. We don't like seeing that. It gives us a sense of insecurity, these kind of things, even though we know it's fine that it's happening. So I think what we need to do is saving versus spending. They're two sides of the same coin, effectively. We just need to learn the skill of spending. And we do that by connecting it with meaning. What do we want to spend our time and money on? Who do we want to spend our time and money on? And we need to make sure that we are understanding that it is absolutely the reason people have worked hard for a number of years in order to have financial independence, in order to have financial freedom, so they can, for the first time since they were a child, become a beginner again and start learning things and enjoying life without no one dictating to us what we're doing. We have freedom. And there's a whole lot that scares people, but that's the point that people work towards. And the struggle that people go through to let go and spend their money is, I think, some of the most satisfying work that I do personally in helping them and coach them through unlocking those thoughts and spending shackles and ensuring that they are spending the money they want to spend and they know they can and have confidence in doing it.
Yeah. Isn't life learning to manage risk and understanding what risk really means and what's appropriate risk versus inappropriate risk, and then departing from safety? My mother was a late starter. She had divorced in her 50s. She had to go back to work, and she worked 12-hour shifts until she was 70. She got burned by the stock market in a drop and went to bonds. She's been in bonds her entire life. She has a bond ladder, and she's very frugal, and she lives just off the interest and not off the principal because she's completely adverse to risk. She's overcome by fear. It was the epigenetics and indoctrination of her life. I also have an aunt and an uncle that COVID shut them down. They had traveled and they have all the money they need in the world, but they sit at home in their condo watching Netflix and playing games on their iPad. They do a little bit with social connection, but what they don't do too is people get so afraid of hoarding their money that they're not giving while living to the next generation and helping next generations at times of need, like in their 20s, maybe pay for a house down payment because you don't own one till you're 40 now. Maybe help them augment and match their Roth IRAs, their HSAs, or their taxable brokerages, because it's become harder to save with inflation and jobs starting out at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. That's not easy because you need most of that to live. So take me back to risk, your concept of it, and how we can learn to manage it without being afraid or fearful.
Yeah, risk is really interesting, isn't it? Because I think when people get to this phase of life, risk is all really associated with the money, i.e. risk of loss, right? So, I'm risk averse, therefore I want to put my money in an environment where it doesn't go down, which is a perfectly rational thing to do. And by the way, another word I'd like to ban is irrational. I don't think people are ever irrational. People are completely rational based on their learnt behaviours, observations and feelings and emotions, right? They're making perfectly rational decisions in accordance with their own kind of unique wiring. So no one ever acts irrationally. So I think risk is interesting from a point of we see risk as loss of money. But if we rewire that and say, actually, the ultimate risk is loss of memories and experiences. That's the ultimate risk. The loss of creating those memories and experiences. And when I reframe this with people, I say, listen, you are not at risk of leaving money on the table, and you are not at risk of losing money. You're at risk of leaving memories and experiences on the table. So if you hoard your money and you don't spend it, what you're essentially doing is taking stock market risk off the table. But what you're putting back on the table is the risk of not using your money to create memories and experiences and have fun. And that's why I try and take the number thing out of this. If I do some sort of financial planning and I see a big number at the end of life, I will say to them, what memories and experiences could you create with that number? Not, oh, by the way, you've got $3 million left. Like, again, that number doesn't mean anything. 3 million doesn't mean anything, but tell me what you could have done with 3 million. Tell me the memories and experiences you could have had when you could have had them. What are those things you'd like to create now? And so it's about flipping the script. There's a risk to us as humans. There's a risk to our money. That's why solid, robust money management is important. There's obviously risks around inflation and risks around markets and all of that stuff. And those risks create fear. And the trouble about fear is it just creates inaction. And so what we need to ensure is that we are looking at the risks of loss that we will feel as human beings if we don't use this money in a way that helps us give back, do good, enjoy, be happy, create memories and create experiences.
We talk about the compounding of money to our highest net worth at death, which I think is a sad travesty. But you also talked about the compounding of time, which really results in wisdom and the ability to give back. But we could have a market crash in time at retirement, right?
Yeah.
Where we don't know how to use it. And it doesn't compound anymore because we're not curious, we're not growing, we're not taking maybe emotional risks or physical risks, we're not adventuring into new and different experiences. We're not the mentor that we're designed to be at this point as we pass off the torch of work in a traditional environment to the next generation. But how can we help them maximize their life? People focus on over-optimization, frugality, and scarcity. How do we learn abundance and balanced optimization? I mean, these are things, and it's the giving back that I see that people forget that they can do with time and money after they're free.
100%. And the thing that I try and navigate round is this enough versus more thing, right? Because what you're saying there is there is this illusion of enough, in my opinion, where when you hit enough, or you think you've hit enough, you end up kind of not trying to grow and learn and give back. And I think human beings need to continuously grow. We need to continuously be able to put ourselves outside our comfort zone, to take risks, to, as you said, mentor, to have a tribe of people. These are the foundations of a happy life, right? Tribe of people, sense of community, giving back, holding status within your community. Those are really, really important. And my problem with this kind of enough thing is it feels like once I've got enough, I'm good. And it simply isn't that. We are wired to move forward. We are wired to want more. And one of the big problems I see is that people don't get curious enough, to kind of, as you said, start again, to take up something new, to learn and to grow both physically and mentally, to be able to contribute back and enjoy this mentorship period, as you rightly said. This is about now being able to think of all of those human things that make us human, that gives us joy and purpose. And I think there's this real misconception around I've hit my number, now I'm good. And we end up retracting away from this continuous movement forward. And I think one of the issues that I do see, and again, you highlighted the saving problem, absolutely, but there's a number of people I work with that I think they've oversaved because they didn't quite know what they were doing. And when they get down and dirty and in the weeds of their life, they realize that actually what they want and what brings them happiness and joy and what they want to do costs very little compared to what they thought. When they truly get down to what gives them purpose, the foundations of a wonderful life, a joyful life, it isn't stuff. It's other things. It's more human things. And the cost of that is much, much less than what people thought. And so instead of saying, is there a spending problem, do people sometimes put themselves in a bit of an issue where they save too much and it just kind of then handcuffs them and it gives them emotional baggage because they could have done things earlier? Because what gives them joy and purpose simply doesn't cost that much. And I've worked with so many people where that's become apparent through the conversations that I've had.
All right, Jackie, you have a story to tell. You checked out our sponsor, The Alloy Market, with a little gold bar that you sold them. How did that work out for you?
That's right, Bill. The short answer is it worked out great. I was really kind of surprised at how seamless the process was. I just ordered the kit online. They had it to me within days. I put the gold in the package, mailed it out, and almost instantly they notified me it was on the way. They told me when they received it, and they finally gave me a quote. And do you know how much I got for it?
No, Jackie, how much did you get?
Well, I got $285. And you know where that's going. That is going in my new grandbaby's 529 plan. And I was, again, very surprised at how seamless the process was.
All right, that's thealloymarket.com. You can declutter this season with your gold, silver, and platinum. Where do we go, Jackie?
Yeah, and here's a bonus. If what you send in is worth more than $199, you will get a $15 bonus. Just enter the code CUTOFI15 and get your bonus.
Yeah, late starters have a unique issue or problem here because they were late to the savings game. They're in a rush with the math and the optimization to get to the money of enough. And then it becomes more important to realize I made it. Okay, I can't necessarily oversave. And so you have to be really good at figuring out, okay, this is where the curve peaks and I've got to start spending time and not saving money. Because if you overwork because you're fearful of the future financially, you'll have spent life that you can't get back. And what was interesting for me is I started my journey 50, 52. We had something, I don't even know what my net worth was. I had no idea. I was completely illiterate, but I knew that no one was coming to save me and that my 60s were coming. Time was winding down and I had to protect myself, my family, and create this nest egg. And just the other day, and I promised myself, and we had a financial plan and we did the right things. We're all equities for maybe 10 years and we started winding down with the numbers. Accumulation is relatively easy when you wrap your head around it. And the journey is 10 to 15 years, almost no matter what you do, as long as you get the numbers right and let it run. But I promised myself at 60 that I'd engage with a financial planner and I would do a retirement readiness check. I was like, okay, I really need to know because I don't trust my numbers. I don't trust my looking at it. I need somebody who can see the blind spots, can really run a robust, stress-tested plan. And the answer came back with where you're at now. You have a 100% chance of success based on your current spend. And I sat there and I was shocked. I didn't expect it. I didn't know what to do next. I don't believe it. And I'm still working my 10 shifts a month in the ER. I'm not prepared to wind that down. And I've been talking about all along, God, my job is so hard. It's an emotional suck. It's so stressful. And it's physically becoming very hard because emergency medicine is like a professional sport when you're younger, and you really should plan in reverse for a 20-year career, because that's when you hit burnout. And we have our burnout curve, which kind of compounds and goes up and down, short, mid, and long-term burnout. And is our financial curve going to meet it at when we need to exit the building, when Elvis leaves the building? And so now I'm stuck here in this moment, and I need to talk to you. I need to talk to life planners like George Kinder, because, okay, how do I wind this down? I don't need to do the night shifts and potentially reduce my lifespan because they're unhealthy. And what is the cost of still working and the cost of the one more year syndrome? And in my mind, I was kind of like, okay, I'll do 2 or 3 more years at this pace as a sequence of returns risk mitigation, as an identity and value and purpose kind of mitigation, because I didn't want to go cold turkey. So let's turn this dial. It's like rheostats or thermostats. Let's turn this dial of active income, active work down slowly, and then turn the dial up of passive income. Let the portfolio work for you, too, and then balance it so the exit is more like a glide path and it's smooth. So many people in the corporate world say, okay, it's a cliff. I'm going to put in my notice and I go from 40 hours a week to 0. I think there's real danger in that.
Yeah. I've got 2 things I really want to say on that. I think there is absolute danger in cliff edge, and there is absolute danger in glide path, right? And I say this from experience. Both avenues and roads still require hard human work. They still require you to put the same amount of work in about who you are beyond the business card. What gives you purpose to pull back the duvet in the morning? How your relationships are going to morph and move and change, and what you're going to do about carrying in some that you love and letting go of some that drain your energy. You've still got to think about the structure that you want your life to be able to have post full-time work. And you've also then got to think about your well-being, right? Your mental, physical well-being. So it doesn't matter whether you do this instantly or you do it over a number of years. That's still got to be done. And one of the challenges, obviously the challenges are really quite clear about the cliff edge, i.e. I stop tomorrow, I haven't put the work in, right, to kind of do that. And now I'm here. But I have seen people commit to a glide path and then not do the work because they're on the glide path, right? So they think the glide path is going to do some of the work for them because they're just going to wean themselves off this. And the experience I've had is that the weaning process helps, but it does not solve the problem. There's still a lot of work to be done. You might have more time. You can wean in certain things and wean off certain things. But I've seen people neglect the hard work because they're going, oh, I'm not going to do the cliff edge. I'm just going to do the glide path. So there's a warning triangle on both here, right? There's both journeys into the second half of life and complete independence require the work. And the other thing I will say is one of my favorite phrases around this about people that are at this point about maybe I am financially independent, but I'm still working, is are you hiding out or holding out? What are you doing? Because if you're holding out for legitimate reasons, that's fine. And they can be both financial and non-financial. You might be holding out because you've worked very hard and there's a particular bonus coming that you want to be there to be able to get. You might be holding out because you have big affinity with the company and you're mentoring the person that's going to take over your role over the next 12 months. You might be holding out because you're a teacher and you want to see the grade that you teach go through and graduate. So there's many reasons why people hold out, but there's also a whole host of reasons why people hide out. And it's because they're hiding out because they don't understand what the work is to put in and they don't know what they're going to be. They have the questions, who am I beyond work? What am I going to do? And then they hide out because they don't want to actually put the work in to understand what that is. So I think there's definitely challenges around both avenues here. I think the best way is to do a glide path, but to understand that there is work along the way to be done, to feel like you can then actually emotionally and financially detach yourself away from that particular phase of your life into the new one.
You know, what's interesting was when I was told and I saw the graphs and I saw the 100% chance of success, I sat there and I almost was numb. I didn't really feel anything. It wasn't the jump for joy, debt-free scream of Dev Ramsey and stuff. And it was like, this came a little too fast, faster than I thought, but not fast enough. And it's what I've been striving for. And I really resonate with your holding out and hiding out. I think I'm doing both at the same time. I think I'm hiding in my job and I'm holding out for, I can rationalize the reasons that I might work another 3 years full time. And there's external factors. My wife loves her job and she's going to continue to work 3 or 4 days a week. Okay, do I sit at home and podcast 24 hours a day? Am I walking the dogs hours and hours a day? Am I volunteering, which I'm doing, which is great. So I have structures that are in place, like Fritz Gilbert and you and others talk about in the transition, the 10 commandments of retirement, and people need to follow you. They need to follow Fritz. They need to follow Dana Anspaugh on the Retirement Manifesto, because he really focuses on these softer sides too, and they're very nuanced. I didn't feel like I thought I was going to feel. Do you find this is true with your clients?
Absolutely. And listen, even today, this morning over here, I met with some new clients, a couple, and I've known him for a long time, actually. I used to work with him and we lost touch. He's older than me. He's in his early 50s. We started working with him. And this morning was the first time that they saw their plans. Okay, so we've done some stuff with them and I've been through some coaching stuff about time and work and what that means to leave work. And he's not quite ready to leave work, he doesn't think, and he never thought he could. And very much like what you just said, I presented them with a plan today that said, you can stop work today. You have 100% success rate in your plan. And in fact, if we wanted to ramp up some uncertainty and take that to an 80% success rate, you can almost add another £30,000 to £40,000 a year every year for the rest of your life on top of what you're saying you're going to spend now. So they didn't speak, really. Kind of, you're giving them this information and you can see that they just don't quite understand or believe. And it's a real tough concept particularly for him to get his head around. He's coming here thinking, I'm going to need to work financially for some more time, because he didn't have a clue what he had and how it could all work. To then thinking about, does he need to go back to work full time? To now being told that he doesn't need to go back to work at all. And the conversation there that you have with them is you've now got choice, which is actually amazing for people. You can now decide what you want to do with your time. And if you decide that you want to go work, that's wonderful, because you've actually made that decision independent of the finances, which is a wonderful framework to make the decision from. But when you add in the dynamics of the couple, his wife turned around and said, well, he's not retiring yet. Like that kind of, I can't have him around the house. I've got my thing that I do. And he's going to come in. She's a bit younger than him and they've got children. And so it's about finding the dynamics of what this looks like. But when you start talking to people about the reality of their situation, what they can do, the great thing that they left with was this understanding that, and he got made redundant, so he hasn't had a job for 3-4 months. He now understands that he has got control over his life. They have got control over their lives. He can choose what work he does. He can be more meaningful in that work. He doesn't have to accept the highest bidder. He can now go and do things with his day that creates money, that creates meaning, that he's now got that ultimate freedom to do it. And I think that's what we should give people, the freedom to make decisions that are in line with their values, that gives them meaning and joy, where money is not central to it. It might be part of the decision, but it's not number one on the checklist. And I think that's what really, really starts to energize people. And I've had many people that have come in and said, I really want to retire. I cannot wait to get away from the job. And you show them that they don't need to work anymore. And all of a sudden, they start liking some of the aspects of their job again, because that pressure has gone. They have a bit more of a I don't care attitude type thing, not in a bad way, but they kind of come in and they go, well, because I now know that I don't need to be here, I'm actually enjoying some of the good parts. And if someone annoys me, I just let it go over my head. I'm not pushing for the next promotion. I'm not pushing to get a pay rise. I'm not worrying. I'm actually enjoying my time at work a little bit more. And it's so interesting when people go through those emotional journeys to see how that shapes what they do. And it actually shapes what they're going to do post full-time work. Because I think everybody should do work of some description for as long as they possibly can, because that work, whether you're paid for it or not, gives us a lot of stuff that we just don't really recognize that we associate with money.
Yeah, the human, as you've talked about, versus retirement, it could and is and should be driven to work and for a purpose, not necessarily for remuneration. And then the autonomy of choice and freedom is really powerful, also really scary. For 30 or 40 years, you've been told, I'm going to show up, you got to do this, you earn your money, you do this. And it gives you that exoskeleton we were talking about, that structure. So you don't have to worry about, how do I structure my own life? How do I structure internally? And so I'm sure you see it with your clients. We strive for freedom. We can't wait for the day, but we forget that we can be free all along the way. As George Kinder says, you are free in the moment. Not in the past, not in the future, but you're free in the moment. If you acknowledge that and focus your energy on that, you can find joy in feeling trapped in your lack of autonomy. We spend time feeling trapped and upset and constrained, and then we get to where we want to go, and then we're overwhelmed. Don't you see that too?
Yeah. Like freedom is a really interesting thing, right? Because again, I think it's what people crave. They go, I want to feel free. And they don't associate where they are now with the ability to feel free, because again, they haven't really done that work that George talks about. But the trouble with freedom is it's all right until you get there, right? I see freedom without any work put in is unstructured time. And if you don't have structure to your time, it ends up a bit chaotic. It's unstructured time and unlimited freedom. I mean, we don't do very well as human beings without structure to our days and this kind of unlimited choice. There's lots of stuff that we talk about the kind of whole paradox of choice. If I think about what we talked about earlier on, about our parents and grandparents, they didn't have as much choice as what we have now. And actually, choice is a bad thing for us. There was a really wonderful study called the JAM study that was done, where they basically, two ends of this particular big fair, they put two jam stalls. And one had 20 jams and one had 4. And what they measured was how many people visited each stall versus how many jams were bought. And what they found is that they had far more people visit the jam stall with 20 jams because they were curious about all the different flavours. But the one that took the most money was the one with 4, because people got these 20 jams and couldn't make a decision about which one to buy. So I think when you've got unstructured time and unlimited choice, it really, really doesn't work for us. We then don't do anything. And so this is that kind of understanding that with freedom, a bit like the Spider-Man thing, right? With freedom comes great responsibility. We, for the first time since our childhood, can dictate how we spend our freedom, how we spend our time. But we can do that earlier if we want to, if we kind of have some intention about what that looks like. But it feels like this moment is the moment that we have freedom and then we relax on it, big sigh of relief, but not understanding that that unlimited choice and unstructured time is really challenging for us as human beings to be able to live in. And so that's where structure and anchors and routines and relationships and all of that stuff really matter to make sure that we are always kind of learning and doing and being, because otherwise the brain is lazy. Yeah, it doesn't like to burn calories. It will always try and shortcut its way through things. So if it will always say, sit on the sofa, watch telly, because you're always going to survive if you do that. That's kind of, I think, a bit of the wiring. And so we need intention to be able to make sure that we have got reasons to not do that stuff and make sure that we are spending, as we said, that time and money as we want to.
Yeah, I love your jam story. That's great. I remember that one from the past. And it's just like the financial services industry. We have thousands of choices of ETFs. It's overwhelming. It's an alphabet soup. And what we need to boil it down to is, okay, somehow we crave complexity and make our lives complex, but really the answer is in appropriate simplicity. As Einstein said, it should be simple, but not too simple. We need to stretch our imaginations. We need to push the limits of our physical or emotional abilities. Otherwise, there's no growth. You can't make it too simple, whereas it's too comfortable and you have the right couch and Netflix is awesome. So we've talked about a lot of counterpoints, a lot of opposing forces, if you will. That's the humans versus retirement. That's what I see in your message. And in understanding the semantics of these opposing forces in that messy middle, that gray area, which is uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable, and we should be. We shouldn't be too comfortable. We should accept some risk, and it's hard to live in the middle. We like to migrate to the poles of thought, where it's the math or it's the emotion, but it's a mix of both. But unfortunately for us, especially as late starters, it's really 80% emotion and 20% math. We don't get it. We flip it and we go 80-20 in the other direction. And it's hard to flip it back. And remember Charlie Munger, invert, invert, invert. I think your message is fantastic. I'm living it. I'm absorbing it. Maybe a lot of our late starters aren't ready for it, but they need to prepare. They need to hear this conversation. They need to get inside their brains. I may lose on my physical abilities, but if I lose my brain and I've lost my curiosity, that's when, for me, life ends. Dementia is my biggest fear. Cognitive decline, I see it all the time. If we have both sides of our brains and all of our reflexes, and we can relate to people, we can make a difference, all of these things, the physical will decay. But leave me my brain, right? My horribly human brain.
Yeah. And I think it's a big worry for a lot of people I work with are seeing dementia and cognitive decline in their parents. And I think I read something last week that now says that dementia has overtaken heart disease as the number one killer in people in older age, right? And that might have been a UK thing, but it is absolutely front and center. And I think if that's the case now, where we've seen significant cognitive decline in elderly people, and this isn't just elderly, by the way, there are people in their 60s and 70s that experience this as well. But if we're seeing that, if we just sleepwalk into this phase of life, are we bringing that on even further? As knowledge workers, as people that have consumed and created and used our brains probably more than any other generation of people. And so we've gone from the physical work through to the knowledge work. If we leave that behind, if we don't keep on top of growth and learning and giving, does that become even more of a risk to us as human beings if we are just going to leave all of that to one side? And I think it does. And that's why I'm so passionate about ensuring that people enter into this phase of life with that growth mindset, that learn again, beginner mindset, ensuring they are keeping themselves mentally and physically sharp by using their time and using their money in a way that enables them to do that, that gives them meaning. It's the most wonderful phase of life when it's done correctly and got right. And so That's why more people need to listen to you and your story about this, because this message needs to get out there as more and more people are entering into this phase of life. Whether they've started early or started late, the work still needs to be done. And the more and more people enter it, the more they need to hear this message to understand the work that needs to be put in to ensure they live a long and happy second half of life.
Yeah, as we come to the end of our conversation, which is hard to end because this is a conversation that cannot be contained in an hour of a podcast. I want to remind our late starters that they didn't start too late. They started with clarity and intention. We got to remind our listeners that retirement, as you say, is human first and financial second. We have the opportunity here to design the most intentional chapter of our lives. Don't fall down on that job. Show up for that work. And it's fun. It is fun. It's not scary. And retirement, as you say, can be the best designed phase of your life if you design it. And you can't design it alone. You design it in your tribe with people in the financial independent space with a financial advisor. It is a joint project. It is a collaborative project. I want to remind our audience that always remember, it's never too late to start, better late than never, and it is always the right time to catch up to FI. Dan, thank you so much for being here today. This has been marvelous. I hope our audience shares your message, this podcast, with 10 friends that need to hear it.
Bill, thank you so much for having me on. What an amazing conversation, and an hour's too short, right? So we'll do it again.
I look forward to meeting you in the future. Listen to Humans versus Retirement. Where can people reach you? Where can they find your book? How can they connect with you? Because you're exploding in America. And I think this shows us that we speak a common language across the pond, that the challenges, the opportunities are the same for all of us around the world. And it's really fun to have this world conversation. How do they find you?
Kind of most active around LinkedIn in terms of a platform. So come and connect with me on LinkedIn. My website, humansversusretirement.com. So that's humansvsretirement.com is where you find all of my work, the podcast, the sketches, the book is all sitting in there, as well as anyone listening in the UK that might want to feel like they need to reach out to a financial planner. All of the details are on there about how to grab a conversation with me and talk about your plans going forward.
I look forward to collaborating with you, and we've already talked about a sketch that I have in mind that's dedicated to late starters. There's not one out there that I'm aware of, so watch for that in the future. Thanks again for joining us today. Again, we'll see you next week on Catching Up to FI.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.